Good afternoon and welcome to our latest CBF conversation. I'm Ellen Seacrest and I serve as the Manager of Global Mission Engagement for the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, and we're delighted that you have logged in to be with us today. Today, we're talking about rural communities and what your church can do or what my church can do to be a part of the rural communities near us. We're delighted to partner in with two of our friends from Together for Hope, which is one of CBF's initiatives, and this year will celebrate its 20th anniversary. Today, we're going to learn more from Francis Ford and from Jason Coker. So, Jason, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell a little more, and then Francis, if you'll introduce yourself after Jason, would be great, as well as the role that you play in Together for Hope. Jason?
Thanks so much, Ellen. My name's Jason Coker. I'm the National Director for Together for Hope, and we focus on persistent rural poverty in the 301 counties of persistent rural poverty in the U.S. I'm native to the Mississippi Delta, which informs just about everything that I do. So I can't get away from the place because it lives inside me. It's a pleasure to be with you guys.
Thank you, Francis.
My name is Francis Ford, and I serve as the Executive Director with Sowing Seeds of Hope in Perry County. And we work in Perry County, and this is one of the counties in the Black Belt of Alabama. And so we have been working with Together for Hope for 20 years. And so we're excited about the work that we've been doing with Jason and with Together for Hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. And we're honored to have both of you with us today to share some of the insights that you have learned, as well as some of the things that you can advise us on, the things to do and the things not to do as well. But as we listen to some of this conversation, Jason, if you'll tell us more about Together for Hope and to identify the sites and that type of information to let our guests know what Together for Hope is really about.
Together for Hope is a rural development coalition. So we are grounded in assets-based community development. That's our philosophy. We believe that the people who live in rural space and who experience persistent rural poverty, they're not the cause, but they're the answer to the problem. They are the experts in their area. So we work with those local experts and listen to them, hear from them where the assets are in that community, and then just map that out and reflect it back to the community. And it's always, assets mapping is always a profound experience with the communities in which we've done it, from Bluefield, Virginia, West Virginia to Side, Mississippi. So assets-based community development is the foundation of who we are. We focus on the 301 counties of persistent rural poverty that break up into about 5 what we call ethnogeographies of persistent rural poverty. So Appalachia is primarily white. The Black Belt, which goes from Alabama to Southern Virginia, and the Mississippi River Delta, those counties are predominantly African American. The Rio Grande Valley, which it goes across the border of Texas, Mexico, that's primarily Latina. And then you have native lands, which are all Native Americans, but also very different. I mean, northern Arizona and the Navajo Nation is very different than Lakota land in South Dakota. But that's the areas that we serve. We have 4 priorities of hope: education, health and nutrition, housing and environment, and social enterprise. Any organization that works at least in one of those, we're interested in recruiting them to be a member. And then finally, our strategies. We have 3 primary strategies that we engage those 4 priorities of hope. And that's interventions, intervening in systems that create the kind of poverty we fight. Innovations, thinking new. How do we create new ways of doing things to alleviate the poverty that exists in rural America? And finally, advocacy. What kind of advocacy issues do we work for in rural space on a municipal, state, and federal level? So that's a real quick introduction to who we are and what we do and where we do it.
Great. Thank you so much. That's a lot of work and a lot of great resources that Together for Hope offers our churches, as well as each of those individual counties that that you're currently serving in. Francis, tell us a little bit about you and your work and the work of Together for Hope there.
Well, Perry County, the area where we work, so and Cesar Hope, and we work here in Perry County. Perry County, as I said, was listed. It's one of the counties in the Black Belt. We have a population of about 9,140 individuals.
Uh-oh, seems we're having a little technical issue right there. We'll see if Francis can get back on with us. If not, I'm sure Jason knows all those details as well. You've lived this and talked this every day of your life, I know.
I think maybe while we're waiting, Jason, if you could say a little bit more, I think I might dive into one question from a little bit earlier, and we can always jump back to hearing from Francis, because her stories are so rich, and the impact that that ministry and Francis herself has had in Perry County is just remarkable. But I wanted, Jason, I think to ask you a question, and you'll be familiar with this because you've spent a fair amount of time in theological education too. There is a vast literature on urban ministry. Tons of books have been written, lots of articles, a lot of reflection. There is comparatively much less written about ministry in rural contexts. And the same is true when you think about courses at seminaries. I mean, almost every seminary has courses on urban ministry, but really a much smaller number have courses on rural ministry. And I'm just curious if you could say, to your mind, what are the most significant features of the rural context for ministry today? I'll just stop there.
Yeah, the two things define rural poverty over against urban poverty. And there's been a great new book out this past year called Places in Need, defining suburban poverty. I don't think we realize as Americans, we have an incredibly high poverty rate for a developed country. We systematically produce the poverty in our country, and it's not by accident. So urban, suburban, and rural poverty are profound issues in our country. And the thing that makes rural fundamentally different than the urban and suburban space is access. We don't have access to resources because of our proximity to population centers, right? So that's the main thing. So transportation is a major issue. How do you get from point A to point B? How much money does that cost? And when I'm saying point A to point B and transportation, I'm talking to grocery stores, to access to clean water. And the small towns across the country, a lot of them have bad infrastructure and they don't have clean water. And so those towns are on water bans or water boil notices for months on end. So that is the access to simple things, adequate housing, shelter, water, and food. That's definitive of rural poverty. And the other part is not just access, but abandonment. What we found in rural spaces is the fact that the economy there has abandoned labor, or it's abandoned people through mechanization of farm labor. When people, and listen, I grew up in the middle of cotton fields and rice fields, and I busted levees on rice fields. It is not easy work, and you didn't get paid a lot of money to do it. But now they don't use people to do that. So the laborers lost their jobs. And then manufacturing was another place where, once a federal policy was passed, a lot of those manufacturing jobs went overseas. And so again, labor was abandoned by industry. That's coal and Appalachia, farming and mechanization of farm labor and manufacturing jobs. All those are examples of how industry has abandoned labor in rural space in particular. So those between abandonment and access, that defines rural poverty. And so when you think of rural poverty, I do want to push against that narrative of people are poor because they're lazy. My grandparents worked in fields. My parents worked in factories. They're the hardest people I've ever seen work. They worked harder than anybody I know. And all of them lost their jobs eventually. And so poverty is not a result of some poor work ethic. Poverty is a result of national federal policies and the decisions we make at macro levels to structure our society. Technology even is more of an example of why we have poverty than any kind of moral failure on people's part. So that's more than you asked for, but
no, that's great. It's not great, but that's useful information. I think that when my wife and I, who both grew up in small rural communities in Missouri, in different parts of Missouri, prior to the pandemic, when we would go visit home and we would drive between those communities, it was in many respects a shell to drive through the interior of the state of Missouri. We didn't grow up in Kansas City or St. Louis. We grew up in these small towns, and you see the exact sort of toll that abandonment has played in those communities. And they look battered in ways and tattered. And part of that is also because unlike in a place where I live now in the city within the perimeter of Atlanta, because there's not that much land, people fix up houses or they replace houses, or in our neighborhood, there would be kind of waves of gentrification. But in a rural community where you do have land, people will sometimes build new things, and all the old things are left to just deteriorate. So there is I remember Martin Luther once said, the poor need beauty as much as they need bread because they're surrounded by ugliness. Mm-hmm. And sometimes in rural communities, there's so much deterioration of the infrastructure. And I've been to your hometown, right, where you and your church have engaged in a lot of work to help rebuild the little small downtown area because things were just left to kind of crumble.
Well, what you say is so true. Because and Dr. King, man, he was so ahead of his time in so many different ways. But his concept of the beloved community, a lot of people talk about it as love and justice, but there was a third leg that he always mentioned when he talked about the beloved community. It was love, it was justice, and it was beauty. Beauty was the third leg. And there is something very profound, and there's data to back up about, broken windows and what that does to the psyche of people. And, in my hometown, you go to the school where K through 12 is right now, and there's not a toilet on every place where there should be a toilet. There's not a sink in every place there's a sink. They've fallen to pieces, and they just swept it up and don't have the money to replace toilets and sinks. And when children go to schools that are like that the facility tells those children, this is what you're worth. You're not worth a toilet. You're not worth a sink. And kids internalize that, and it shapes how they see themselves and how they see the world. And my petition is that we don't have to live that way. We don't have to tell our children that narrative in rural space. And I'm begging the rest of America to join the petition, right? That we live in those spaces because of the policies we vote on and the way we don't hold public officials accountable. When people don't pay their fair share to live in this country, when they're already the wealthiest people in this country, it trickles down to children destroying their self-image because they literally, and I don't mean to say this, and they literally don't have a pot to piss in. I mean, that's what we're doing in rural space. And Frances Ford is an incredible practitioner in Alabama. She's worked way before Together for Hope was ever a thing. She's from Marion. She's from Perry County. Her brothers marched with Dr. King when he came through there during the March on Selma. And there she is. She's back.
We're bragging about you, Frances.
Well, Tim, thank you so much. And I don't know how much of that, what you all said and how much of that's true now, but I just know that it's been good to know Jason and Steve. I have this work. It has been wonderful to know you all and to be a part of Together for Hope has just been a wonderful part, and it's been a blessing to me as an individual.
Francis,
Great. Well, Francis,
pick up
Francis,
where you were. Yeah. Sorry, Ellen.
Yeah, that's all right. We're really glad that you made it back. And Jason was just complimenting you about the work you did even before Together for Hope started. That we were able to come into partnership with you for. So tell us a little bit about that work and working in your own home community and how that has transformed lives for us.
Well, working here in Perry County it's been a joy, because one thing, when I came back, I was living in Perry County, but I was working in Dallas County. And then I was interviewed by Mayor Daniel, who was at that time he was working on the board of Sowing Seeds of Hope with Mark Gray and Dr. David Potts and Mr. Roy Barnett and Dr. Yeager. And he was working with them. And so they interviewed me and asked me about coming to serve as the healthcare coordinator for Perry County. And after they invited me to come to do that, and it was coming back home, and I was going to be doing some things that I had been doing and learned at the hospital and doing there to help with healthcare. But once I came to see, it was so amazing to me to see how when I left, there was so much more in Perry County than when I returned back. And even though I was still staying here, I was working somewhere else. So I didn't realize the changes that had taken place. So now but when they invited me to come back and work with Sowing Seeds of Hope, it gave me an opportunity to put my faith in action. It gave me an opportunity to do work and to my vocation of being a nurse, but I could also turn around and then put my faith in action and help individuals that had a need. And I was so appreciative, because I had always wanted to do mission work. I always wanted to do things to help people. And this gave me that opportunity. And I'm going to share this little story with you all before we start talking about everything. I had wanted to do mission work so much. Every time I heard about people doing mission work, I wanted to go to a foreign country. I just get emotional even when I think about it. I wanted to go to foreign countries, and I kept hearing about people going to Ethiopia, and the doctors at our hospital, they would go to South America, and they would go places and do things. And I wanted to do those great things that they were doing. And so one day I was coming back one night from Vestavia Hills, and I had been to a CBF meeting at Vestavia Hills. And when I was coming back, I was talking to the Lord to ask him, was this really what you wanted me to do? You want me to leave nursing and come and here in Perry County? Because I couldn't see where there was really anything for me to do that I could do. And the Lord told me, and yeah, it was raining. So I always have a lot of conversation with the Lord when it's thunder and lightning and raining. I'm by myself. And so as I was driving, though, and I began to pray to ask him, is this really where he wanted me to be? God said to me, I have people in Perry County that have needs that are not met. There are places that you have never traveled, and there will be people you will see, and you will meet their needs. And when you do it, you're doing it for me. And because of that, I thought that he really didn't know what he was talking about. But every now and then he does something. And when he does it, he reminds me that, friend, I know what I'm doing. You might not be able to see it, but I know what I'm doing. And that was when we had Ivan. When Ivan came through, I had a chance to work along with Mary Moore, and we went to visit homes and carry water and carry MREs, those ready-made meals that they have. When we carried up, I went into homes in Perry County that they did not have wooden floors, but they had dirt floors in them. We went to a house, and I could not figure out why this young lady was coming out of the woods, and it was like 90 degrees, and she was coming out of the woods, and the door was open, and it was hot, and it was already hot, but she had both doors open, and you could see straight through the house. And she had a stove where she was cooking on a wooden stove, and she was coming from an outhouse. and we were carrying her water and food. And every time I saw things like that, it reminded me. It was God reminding me there is still work for to be done in Perry County. This is why you're here. And helping those individuals. And then we start looking at the opportunity that our self-help housing program. It's an opportunity for individuals that that may not have inside plumbing, individuals that may be living in those dirt floors and living in tin houses, that there is an opportunity for them to have homes, that they can have homes with inside with bathrooms, with not just one but two bathrooms, and that we can have for low and very low income families. We have built 18 homes since we started, and we do that in partnership with USDA Rural Development and with our volunteers from around the country. And so we look to see that, it's things like that. And when I look and think about not only that, but I see where we talk about the blood pressure and the stroke death rate in Perry County. When we came on board, it was 244 per 100,000. And when we looked at that, Dr. Sands from Stanford University said that we could do a blood pressure clinic here. And he said, I've done that before in some of the other areas where I did mission work. So let's do a blood pressure clinic. We started doing a blood pressure clinic on Wednesday afternoon, and we started that in 2004. It continues today. But when we look at that, we know it's not the only reason, but we look at now that our stroke death rate is like 83% per 100,000. So we can see where it made a difference by us providing access to health care, helping individuals through some funding we get from the Holy Name of Jesus Trust. We help pay for medicines. We have those individuals through the Medicare, enrolling people in Medicare Part D to make sure they can get their medicines, make sure they get the full benefit of having Medicare, making sure that individuals that think that they can't have Medicaid and have food stamps at the same time, to educate them and help them to realize that they can. Help parents to know that their children can have all kids and they can still get their food stamps because they didn't understand. And so we've educated them. And those have been some of the opportunities that we've had. We can go it now when individuals have a need, they will come and ask us about helping because they know and see that Sow and Seeds of Hope have become a part of the community. We have become where we're kind of, our hands are and our arms are always open and outstretched, encouraging people. We have looked at when we came on board, the school system was almost ready to be taken over by the state. We came in and we have invited like University of Alabama, Judson College, and Stanford University have come in, worked with our schools, helped our students. Then we had Teach for America to come in. Now our schools are doing well. They have, and now they're looking, that they had, I think it was in 2019, that they had $2 million worth of scholarships for they gave to their students, their senior students. And that would never have happened when we started this in 1999 and in 2000. That didn't happen. But now, because of partnerships and because individuals have gone out and making a difference in the schools to help. So we're looking at and they're trying to bring in also a charter school into the schools, into the area. But we can see where public schools have improved and they have gotten better. And so I think that, and every time we're doing things, we're always giving books away. Miss Eugenia told us that she wanted Miss Eugenia Anderson from Mountain Brook Baptist Church. She wanted every child always to have books. She was always about giving books. So we have been giving books when we have a fun day, whether we're doing Christmas at the center, whether we're just doing, sometime one day we had Susan and Cynthia and them had an event in November that they just gave away books. Kids came and they gave them books and gave them some popsicles. They did that in August. They gave books and popsicles away. So we're doing things to encourage children to read. We have 2 free libraries that we put, one here outside of Sow and Seeds of Hope. We have one at Friendship Baptist Church where individuals can come and get books and they can read them. And so we're doing things like that to make a difference in our community. that we have just been, it's been such a blessing to, every time a need has come, God has sent somebody to come to help us meet that need. It has been that he has sent some wonderful people to Sow and Seeds of Hope to volunteer. He has sent some people here to work with us, and that has been a wonderful thing as well. Those individuals help us to make a difference here in Perry County, and so we're
Francis,
very grateful for that.
on that point, Francis, let me ask you a question. And I failed to say earlier when I hopped in and asked Jason that question. My name's Stephen Porter, and I serve as the coordinator of global missions for Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. So we are excited to have you all joining us on this webinar that are viewing it. And so I want to pick up on Francis on what you just said, and Jason too to chime in. Francis, you just mentioned the importance of volunteers and partners like churches, including, and in particular, I want to ask both of you the question, and perhaps Jason, you could start. How can churches partner directly with Together for Hope sites? And can, I mean, Francis already started this down this road, but can you offer some compelling examples of churches that have done that?
Absolutely. And before I do that, I do want to say, because Miss Francis is humble and she'll never brag on herself, never. She was inducted into the Alabama Medical Hall of Fame and Nurses Hall of Fame for her work in Perry County. She's got a dialysis kit clinic there. She changes the world every day. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I love my job. I get to work with people like Francis.
St. Francis.
She's incredible. She's incredible. And Alabama knows it. So now to address your question about church involvement, some of the most profound experiences in CBF churches are with their partnerships with local Together for Hope sites. I think of Wilshire Baptist Church and their relationship with Delta Hands for Hope in Shaw, Mississippi, and how Wilshire's been able to be a part of transformation at Delta Hands for Hope. But through that reciprocal relationship, they've also been transformed. And kids in Shaw, Mississippi have gone back to Dallas and worked in Wilshire at their mission work in Dallas. And that kind of two-way street helps the kids in Shaw understand their own space as agents of God's transformation in the world, and they can go and do mission work themselves, and then learn, like, hey, we look what we've learned in Dallas. We can go back and do this stuff at home. That's been transformational for both Wilshire and Shaw. First Baptist Church, Richmond, Virginia, they have a long-term relationship with Together for Hope, Arkansas. And we continue to see the fruits of those relationships. It's transformed First Baptist Church in Virginia, and I think the church would say so. Presidio, Texas, has a great relationship with Johns Creek Baptist Church, and Johns Creek goes and does baseball academies type thing, baseball training every year. And it's funny, I was there at the high school where the principal's office is, and the secretary of the school had a picture that she went to the graduation of some of the kids who came to Presidio. She went to Atlanta to their graduation in their high school because of those relationships.
Jason, that strikes me, as you said earlier when you were quoting Dr. King, that's beloved community.
Absolutely.
When it's going in both directions. Their relationships of true friendship where people are changed in both directions. That really is beautiful.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's Together for Hope offers that in some profound ways because of, we're right here in the same country. And look, Little Rock and Richmond and Helen, Arkansas is a long way from each other. Presidio and Johns Creek's a long way from each other. But there's real relationship in a partnership, long-term partnership space that's transformational.
Francis, can you give an example of a church that's made a memorable connection with Sowing Seeds of Hope?
I think when you say a church that made something that the community, everyone knows and they look forward to, and it's something that is the Savior Hills Baptist Church and the Church of the Covenant, and those churches that were with Seed Camp. Seed Camp is a time when they come into the community and they're here for a week. the kids are so excited about it till even when they're asking about it all the way. Once they're asking about all summer, and even in the winter, they're talking about what happened at seed camp, talking about the things that they learned, and they have opportunity to do music. That we have that Gary Fur comes. He helps them to play instruments and talk to them about music, things that they would ordinarily get a chance to do. They do science projects, that they have math. And when they get through, and they will have at the end of the week, they do a little performance that they do, and the parents get a chance to come and see what they've learned and the songs that they sing, and have an opportunity. And it's something to make a difference in this community, because we don't have a boys club. We don't have those things, a YMCA. We don't have that. And we don't have a lot of school activities for children to go during the summer. So Seed Camp has been something that has really caught on, and the kids look forward to coming. And every year they start off maybe on Monday. They may have like 80 kids. By the end of the week, they'll have 140. And coming because they're so excited about what they're learning and the opportunities for them there. So I think that
great example.
Make with Seed Camp.
Yeah, Jason reminded me in the little chat box a moment ago of Second Baptist Liberty, which is in my home state. It's Liberty, Missouri, which is a little bit northeast of Kansas City. And they developed a relationship with a community in Bridger, South Dakota, South Dakota, and then this really, really small community with the help of some wonderful field personnel we had serving there in South Dakota. And the relationship that was striking to me is we had an annual Together for Hope meeting in South Dakota, and we were visiting this community, and we happened to have a couple of members from Second Baptist Liberty who came to that meeting. And when we toured a ministry in Bridger, afterwards they said, well, before we drive back, because we were staying in a different part of South Dakota and we had a couple-hour drive ahead of us, they said, we need to make a few stops. And they stopped at the local school. It was a K through 12 school. They went in, the principal embraced them. They clearly had a relationship. They'd been friends for a decade. They knew each other. They talked, and they said, oh, and we brought these things for you. And then we actually drove into the little community to specific people's houses to drop off a toolbox to someone who was a mechanic that needed a new set of tools, and they had had friendship with this person for years. And we drove up to their front door, knocked on it, and sure enough, and they had this exchange. And you could see the community, but it was striking the depth of relationship. It wasn't simply a project. It wasn't a one-off. These relationships had real roots. They were true friendships, and they brought each other joy. And Jason, thanks for reminding me of that example as well. Well, with that, let me change the questions for a second from examples of partnership. And I do want to a little perhaps plug. If you are a member of a church or a church staff member and you want to connect with the Together for Hope site, let me encourage you to talk with Jason. And Jason can connect you with sites all over the country. Frances, obviously, if you're interested in connecting in rural Alabama, she would be happy, I'm sure, to talk with you about different opportunities. But there are a lot of opportunities, as Jason outlined, those 5 different areas or regions of Together for Hope. And so I do want to say that this is not just about these other churches that already have commitments. There are many, many more opportunities to come. So please do be in touch with us in that. But let me ask another question. And this changes from the direct engagement conversation to advocacy. And I know, Jason, that you're passionate about this. And I know Frances got herself in some hot water in the past couple of years advocating for hospitals in her community. And so this work naturally draws us into larger questions of not simply doing stopgap things, but addressing structures. And so how can churches outside of rural contexts become advocates for rural communities in our country?
Well, when we did civil rights, Darren Dement, the youth minister at Wilshire Baptist Church, he was asked, about this work, and he goes, "It's one thing to talk about rural poverty. It's another thing to put a face to it." And I think advocacy is rooted in knowing the face, in the sense that when you know that there's something happening that's causing harm to somebody you love, you're going to do your best to stop it. Mm-hmm. And the harm that's happening to the people we love is policies. It's when you say a business can go overseas and get cheaper labor, they're going to do that, right? And it's going to hurt the people who are here. So, when those people who were hurt, for me, it was my mom and dad. Both of their factories went international. You're going to I advocate for your mom and dad when it's kids who are growing up in Perry County. You're going to advocate for them when you see that a black man dies at a rate 4 times higher than a white guy in Perry County because of prostate cancer. Miss Francis has intervened in that, right? She changed the outcome, the health outcomes in that space in particular. That's all advocacy is saying it shouldn't be this way. Let's not make this possible. Let's do something better than this. That's all advocacy is. And it is political. It's absolutely political. But if we don't have a say in the way our politics function, it only hurts our people. So get politically active because it's a moral issue that we're called to, because it hurts people we love. We don't have to be, if we're apolitical, it doesn't matter to us. And for me, I think people who live in rural space, they matter to me. It's my mom and dad. It's my sister. It's my grandmother. I love them. That's what it is.
And Francis, 1 second before you do that, I just want to ask Ellen, because Francis can tell us, I think, some really powerful stories about her own fight for advocacy and for access for people, to pick a phrase that Jason, you used earlier. But Ellen, I just want you to say a word, because we have you are working closely with John Mark Bowes on advocacy and helping tie advocacy and global missions closer together. Could you just say a word about that before Francis tells us something that just breaks our hearts?
Well, every time Francis talks or tells a story, I feel like we need to have an altar call as well. And as Aaron said, we need to put the Cash App up after she tells some stories. So, but an exciting part of our new work for 21 is in the advocacy department with Global Missions. So John Mark Bowes and I are partnering together to help our encourager churches recognize the advocacy that they are already doing within their communities and in their state, but being able to be more of an advocate for that, not just a doer of the good work, but actually speaking on behalf of it publicly. And then we'll continue to look at the work of advocacy and see where churches who are really strongly involved in advocacy already, we'll look at those as ways to help form encourager churches as well through some of our field personnel, because most of our field personnel are strongly involved in roles of advocacy within the United States and around the whole world. And so it's a great way for our churches to have a strong partnership with a field personnel or Together for Hope site, but also to become more of a vocal advocate for those issues, whether it be crimes against women, for health, children's education, extreme poverty, those types of things. So we'll be looking at that. So it's an exciting opportunity for us to do that. We are partnering together at CBF North Carolina to offer a workshop on that, which will be in March, and we're going to make that video available as well after March when it's showed. But Francis, tell us a little bit more about your work there.
Well, I think that when I was listening to Jason, as he was saying, talking about relationships, and that's what I think that it is. It make a difference. I tell people a lot of times when we talk about the numbers and the And we know that over 50% of our children live in poverty. And you can talk about the numbers of saying that the median income is about $26,000 when you think about that. But the numbers is not what I want you to remember. I want you to remember the faces. I want you to come and see these individuals, because you can talk about numbers. And when you talk about numbers, you look at that and that may not make an impression on you. But when you come and play with these children, when you come and see these individuals here that are living in poverty, and they have lived in poverty so long till they don't even know they're in poverty. This is just a way of life for them. And that you can give them hope by coming, and you can share with children that have always been without, have always lived on food stamps, and you can have students to come and share with them, have our volunteers to come and talk to them about, they're looking at being engineers, they're talking about going to school to be doctors, and that can give them hope, and that can let them see something outside of the norm. And so I think those are the kind of things that we look at. And I know for myself, when we were talking about getting the dialysis center, when you start talking about advocating for something, to me, it was because I had a sister-in-law that was on dialysis. I had a brother-in-law that had to miss days off of work because he had to take her to dialysis. And it was days that if she got sick, he would have to leave work to go take her to the hospital, or go take her somewhere for to have her shunt declotted. And I saw the struggle for them, that having to drive 60 miles 3 times a week in order for her to live. It was not an option as to whether she was going to go. She had to go if she was going to. And that's why you start looking. No, I'm not talking about we got 50 people that's in that, we're looking at those numbers. But what we start talking, you advocate, because these are people that you see them. These are my classmates that I look and say, or this may be someone that taught me in school. And I see these individuals, not just the name of a person that's going to dialysis, but these are my neighbors. These are my friends. And that's why I think that it make a difference when you have a relationship with individuals. Like with a hospital, I think about the hospital and the need that we have for a hospital. My mother died in 1981, and she died with cancer. My mother had to go to Birmingham to receive treatment and to get care. This is 2021. If you get cancer now, there is no hospital. We did have a hospital that it was just a small hospital at that time. Now there is no hospital in Perry County. And if you get sick in Perry County, you have to drive 30 miles to receive care. You have to drive if you have, and it's a disgrace to think that now we're looking at, here it is in 81, now we're in 2021, almost 40 years later, we're still having to go outside of our community to receive care if you get cancer, if you get sick. That shouldn't be. Healthcare should not be a privilege or something just to certain people. Everybody has a right to have healthcare and have access to healthcare. And I think every community, every county deserves to have a hospital, so that when they lay down at night, they're not worried about if they get sick, whether they're going to be able to go to the hospital, or people deciding that they'd rather die than to go to a way to go, know that they're driving. And then when they drive, when they get there, they still got to wait hours and they may not get care. That's why I'm saying it's important that people receive health care, and that we look at it and say, this is not about numbers. This is about people. Yeah. These are about people that we love and people that we know. So that's why, and I'm sorry, I get emotional when I think about it. I remember the struggle that we had with my mom, and we having to take out work and having to work all night and then drive to Birmingham and stay all day and then go back to work at night, because I was a nurse, but I was a nurse in another county. And there is no hospital here. And that's why it's not, healthcare should not be something that's just available to a certain group of people, but it should be something that everyone has access to. And I think that every county should have a hospital, so that they may not have one that does open heart surgery or even do major surgery, but they should have a hospital and access to an emergency room. So when they get sick, We're not watching individuals die from having a heart attack, and they're waiting on an ambulance for 20 minutes. And when they wait on, then someone get them in the car and drive them to the hospital, and they die in the emergency room. And if there had been a hospital, those individuals may have lived. So that's why I said, and I'm sorry, but that's when we start talking about these are not just numbers, but these are individuals that we know and we care about.
And I think that's exactly the heart of advocacy. It is because you have it's either happening to you or somebody you love, and it's through the relationships that get built through Together for Hope that's why churches get on there like, yeah, we're going to sign up on that. We're going to put our name on that dotted line. We're going to advocate for something because of Miss Francis, or because of Rodarius, or because of Ira, or because of Jose. I mean, it's because of the relationship that's been experienced there. And listen, it's personal, and that's how the political is absolutely personal. And Stephen Raj Chidi is an economist he's a Harvard-trained economist out in Stanford University, super smart guy. He leveraged big data to figure out like what are the causes of poverty, what direct causation. And the number one causation they found in leveraging big data was segregation. Mm-hmm. And he got into that. He goes, but when people hear segregation in America, they think automatically of race. He said the segregation that causes poverty in America is an economic segregation, because rich people live where rich people live, middle class people live where they live, and the poor live where they live, and they never see each other's neighborhoods. The only people who see each other's neighborhoods are the laborers that go to the rich people's neighborhoods. And outside of that, they don't interact socially, and they don't interact from a standpoint of proximity. So there is a huge discrepancy in worldviews between, economic divisions. And it's one of the reasons why whenever somebody doesn't feel like they're an advocate for something, or they don't feel like they need to do, have a call to action, it's because they've been so segregated that politics doesn't affect their lives. And that is a profound privilege. It's a profound privilege. And you're a privileged place when politics don't affect your life.
Yeah, Jason, it strikes me that Jesus, when he was questioned by the clever attorney, right, about what must I do to inherit eternal life, Jesus' response is very traditional Jewish response, right? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second's like it, love your neighbor as yourself. The challenge of that, of course, is if I don't know my neighbors, literally, or I have sequestered myself in pockets or enclaves of privilege, that makes it much, much more difficult. I remember when I was little, my grandmother would take care of me. She lived in a town of 700, and I spent lots of time with my grandma, and she had a party line. So you'd pick up the phone and you could listen in on other people's business. And she had one neighbor that liked to do that a lot. So we had to kind of listen carefully before she shared much, right? We had much closer bonds of relationship in communities than we do now. And that's, I give lots of examples of that, but it strikes me what you're talking about is really important. It's really hard to love people you don't actually know. And so it also strikes me that, Francis, when you're talking about the challenge of hospitals and the need, because people who needed that, who need access. There's been, series over the last few years here in Atlanta, where I live, of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on the, you might call it a pandemic of closing rural hospitals in Georgia. And I'm sure that that's not just true of Georgia, right? All the while, people we elected in some of these states as governors have refused additional money from the federal government to expand Medicare coverage. Now, that is not simply, do I address that with a short-term mission trip of my church? No, that gets to the heart of, how do I vote? Do I vote only in my self-interest? Do I apply pressure to politicians to make better choices and that take the concerns of people that live in rural communities seriously? And those are matters of advocacy. And when you all were talking earlier, I'm not quite sure. I guess I would have had to open my Facebook and to type in a comment in the comment feed, and that was a little too complicated for me, Ellen. So, but I wanted to plug a book. Stephen Reeves and Katie Murray wrote The Mission of Advocacy. You can find it on Amazon. They are Stephen heads advocacy for Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, and Katie has been on staff at CBF Churches, and she's wonderful. She was once upon a time my student. I was privileged to have her in class my first semester when I taught at a Truett Seminary many years ago, and it's a great primer on how your church can actually get engaged in advocacy. We talk about it as our advocacy toolkit at CBF. So that's a great resource practically to help you if you're out there listening to this webinar and thinking, yeah, but what can my church do besides just me personally voting? It walks you through step by step how your church could engage in advocacy. I know it's time to turn over to Ellen so she can do some wrap up things. I'd had one last question that really was about what does flourishing look like in rural America? And I think Frances already hit on that pretty eloquently. Without even asking it. It just naturally flowed out of her that we need to live in communities, or people deserve in communities, rural communities, the same sort of access that a lot of us take for granted. And to borrow Jason's term, that we're privileged to not recognize our need. So thank you, Frances, for speaking to that too. Ellen?
Many of our churches don't live in the rural communities. We live in the cities, we live in the suburbs, that type of thing. But we all know that we have access to rural communities near us. Having grown up in one myself, I know where those are. But our churches sometimes stray away or sway away from participation in those communities because we don't know how to help. We don't know how to become the good neighbor or the tough questions or the right questions to ask. So Jason, what are some challenges from you and from Frances or encouragement for our churches to actually step up and get involved in the rural communities near us?
It's fairly easy. I mean, if you send me an email, I'll connect you to the ones that are closest to you or the ones that you're most interested in. I mean, your gifts as a congregation might be better suited to a Together for Hope site that might not be the one closest to you. But that's just a matter of matchmaking, really. At the end of the day, since COVID, and Miss Frances, Sowing Seeds of Hope was a COVID testing site, one of the only Together for Hope sites that function as a COVID testing site because of her. And we have been in the food distribution business since COVID. I mean, between Jorge Zapata in the Valley, Linda Stringfellow, Cora Jackson, Chiquita Fountain up in the Delta, Miss Frances, LeCount Anderson, Scarlett Jasper, Anna and LeCount, we have been distributing hundreds of thousands of pounds of food since March of last year. It is an enormous amount of work that is not what we always do. In addition to what because we're doing what we always done too. So helping us financially by donating to any of our sites or to us nationally so that we can dole it out. Showing up as much as you can during COVID. Praying for us, learning about us. Go to our website, get the material. Learn about Together for Hope, and then connect, holler at me. I will connect you to our good people because there's only one Frances Ford. Let me say that. But there's a lot of Together for Hope sites, and there are people like Frances Ford there who are also remarkable and do incredible work. So, it's easy to learn about us and jump in.
Yeah, great. We had we got one question on our Facebook page that says, is there some connection or possible future connection between Together for Hope and church planters?
In rural space, we're working with BSK. I got some good friends at BSK in their rural track now.
Baptist Seminary of Kentucky.
All right. Yep. Baptist Cemetery. Baptist Seminary of Kentucky. And no jokes for that. And then Campbell University and Campbell School of Theology. Both of those schools have rural tracks and do really good work with rural ministry. We don't have anything right now in the works of church starting and Together for Hope. That doesn't mean that, we don't want to be in that work. It's just that we haven't gotten there yet. But there are some good places that are working in that area for sure.
Right.
CBF has been engaged in church planning, and so if it's often driven by people who have a strong sense of calling to a particular context. We don't just, sit in Decatur offices and, pull out a map and say, we think it would be strategic to be here, there, and the other place. It's really driven by people coming to CBF and saying, I have a passion to see a church here. And so we have some really strong, interesting, small congregations in rural communities that were planted in just that sort of a way.
Yeah. Jason, earlier you'd mentioned civil rides, and in case there are people watching who don't know what that is, give us a 1-minute intro to civil rides for us.
We ride our bikes from one civil rights space to the next. First one was in Memphis at MLK 50 from the Lorraine Motel on April 4th. And then we rode down to the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum in Jackson, 3 days, 200 miles. Went through the Emmett Till saga, Fannie Lou Hamer's territory, Medgar Evers space. That was year one. The next year we went through Marion. We started in Montgomery, rode through Selma over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and ended that day there with Miss Francis at Sowing Seeds for Hope. Got up the next morning, left there, and ended at 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, where Doug Jones and the pastor came and welcomed us at the end of the ride. It's to raise money and awareness for rural poverty in America by paying homage to the civil rights movement. And the legacy of civil rights there in Marion is some of the most profound in our country. And Miss Francis was right there in the middle of it. And I'm always grateful to her.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Stephen?
One final thing I'd like to plug today is that at CBF's Cooperative Baptist Fellowship's General Assembly this summer, we will be celebrating the 20th anniversary of Together for Hope as a coalition, as a network. And so we're really excited about that, and we hope that you will come and join us. We're still figuring out right now if that's going to be virtual or in person, like everyone else wrestling with this pandemic. But in either case, there will be virtual access. I'm pretty confident about that, to be able to participate in some way, even if we are able to do something in person. So I hope that you'll put that on your calendar, and we will have more information to come as that develops. But it's a really important milestone for Together for Hope.
Yes, indeed. It's a great way for us to celebrate something good and positive in 2021. So Jason and Francis, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your insights, your passion, and your spirit. And thank you for the challenge that you lay before each of us as we continue to try to be the presence of Christ, as we have said hundreds and hundreds of times at CBF, but really as we seek to be that presence. And to love our neighbors. So thank you. And thank you to those who have tuned in with us today. We invite you to share the CBF conversation later with some friends via YouTube or our cbf.net website, where you'll find the rest of our previous CBF conversations librated as well. So thank you. Thank you for what you do in your communities, and thank you for the gift that you are to us at CBF. Godspeed.